to this short video on framing. In this episode, we're going to look at how to adjust the scale and positioning of our film.
With that, friends, let's get started. When looking at framing, you want to follow the rule of thirds. So the rule of thirds says that you want to take your screen and divide it into essentially 9 different segments. You can see in this example that there are 4 grid lines, which creates our 9 grid spaces in the composition. And the rule is that you want to have your subject or points of interest along those lines, especially at intersections of those lines. For example, here you can see that the woman is lined up along one of those grid lines and her face is relatively close to an intersection point. Our eyes are drawn to those grid points. In another example, you can see that this guy's face also in the rule of thirds. So you want to offset your subjects. Rarely do you want to have your subjects dead center. So when we look at this shot, this is poorly framed. It does not follow our rule of thirds. Mr. Yost is dead center. So we want to frame this and we want to move him to one side or the other. Since later on in the video, I know that he ends up on the left side of the screen, I'm going to go ahead and frame him initially on that left side. To do so, you want to make sure your clip is active and come up here to Effect Controls. Again, if you don't have Effect Controls, you're going to go Window, Effect Controls. Yours might look a little different. These might be closed down. You just twirl those little arrows. There we go. And we're looking at the scale and the positioning. The scale is going to bring our screen in. Again, I'm just clicking and sliding that or out. You can come over here and grab these little corners and it's way more intuitive, in my opinion, to come over here and click, drag it, and you can scale your pictures in or out. If you know the scale that you want, you can simply click on those words and type in, let's go 150, and now Yost is bigger. You want to be careful with scale though, because if you scale it up too much, your picture begins to pixelate. For example, let's scale this up to 450. You can see that Yost begins to pixelate. As I go even closer in on him, you can see that he looks very, very pixelated.
The art of filmmaking.
And it's blurry and it looks pretty bad. Now I'm way too zoomed in. So I'm going to reset all of these. To reset, you just click on that and whoop, it goes back. Oh no, whoop, there we go. Back to the original. So you can always reset and get back to your starting point. So I've found that when you scale less than 150% with our camera settings, it turns out not too bad, but I wouldn't go more than 150%. So you can see that it's still not that good of a frame. There's all this extra white space around him. And when we follow the rule of thirds, I want to move him so that he's up here. To do that, I'm going to use these little sliders. There's 2 numbers here, 960 and 540. This corresponds to the horizontal positioning and the vertical positioning, respectively. So I'm going to click and slide this around, moving this slider up and down, shifts Mr. Yost side to side. So I'm going to want him about there. And the second value, guess, that's the up and down. I'm going to put in there. That's generally in that grid line of the rule of thirds. That's a good place to put him. However, there's not much more we can do with this because the original shot was framed so poorly from the camera. This is not a good shot because we have all this empty extra white space that draws the eye away from Mr. Yost. So when you're setting up your camera, make sure that you've got your final output in mind, knowing that you can't scale up a whole lot. When we look at this 2-person shot, you can see we have both Mr. Yost and Mr. Lau. They're offset a little bit. I'm going to frame them. Let's scale them in. Scale them into 150. Now this is a little more interesting because we have the 2 of them. I do want to raise them up a little bit. That's our vertical value. And we'll put them right there. Right. Again, not a great shot because there's still all this extra dead space around. You want to make sure that when you're setting things up, you don't have that. And in order to get rid of that space, if I zoom in even more, well, now you can see they're starting to get a little pixelated.
Up in post-production. Post-production is a fancy way of saying after you've done all the filming.
If you like it, great. It's a little blurry. I think the output is going to be a little bit blurry. So to recap, we can scale people in or out, slide that little value, click on it, type in a number. We're going to go to 150. If you want to reset your parameters, you can click on this and it goes back to what it was. Now it's still all this extra black space because I moved the positioning side to side. Reset that parameter. That's my original shot. I don't like it, so I'm going to go back to what I had. Undo, undo, undo. Brings me back up to where I was. I've got the best framed shot I can with these constraints.
So there you have it. We looked at how we can use the effects control panel to adjust the scale and positioning of our different clips in the film. That's all for this episode. We'll see you in the next one.